Thank you for tuning in to the 144,000 Angel Network show. Today is November 22nd, 2016. I may have lost an election. Being that this is my first time, I really didn't expect to win. But I must say I did have fun. And I sure met a lot of people. What I'm going to talk to you about is a little about my experience as a candidate, my observations, and I'm giving you a fresh new perspective and spreadsheet data analysis from a scientist, because I consider myself a scientist. We're going to be talking about fraud here in Hawaii's election. I'm going to share with you the most obvious and the least obvious discoveries as to why I believe there is election fraud. Being that I was raised and lived here mostly my entire life, I know politics, I know Hawaii's politics. I know the social issues, and I'm very aware of my surroundings, and on the outer islands too. And I'm part of that millennial age or movement in which while I was in college, the internet became our tool. It was being developed at that time. While I was attending school in New York, I was using a very simple basic email program to communicate back to my friends at UHH. So I'm part of that internet age, and I grew up with Microsoft and the software Excel spreadsheet and Publisher and whatever else became what I was part of that Microsoft Excel package, which many scientists use today in analyzing data, Microsoft Excel. During the campaign, what I found was most profound was that there were no debates or forums, and all the attention and focus was on the mayoral debate. And when I did do a couple of interviews, the journalists made me look really bad. They took 1 minute out of a 25-minute phone conversation, and they made me look really, really bad. I was labeled the most racist, bigoted person. And has anyone ever wondered how a local island girl grew up in Hawaii, grew to have such hate? Did anyone stop and wonder why? This is Hawaii. This is a culturally diversified place. But within the past 15 years, it hasn't. So anyways, I was made to look really bad. A disgrace to the Hawaiians, to the Americans, and to the USA military. There was no regards or consideration that I was a daughter of an Air Force officer and a disabled Army veteran, and that my colleague, Shirlene Ostrov, was an Air Force colonel, and that John Carroll was a retired Air Force pilot, and that all three of us lost by significant landslides, humiliating landslides. Now, has anyone ever wondered how much of a disrespect that is to America? To the families of the military? I can feel their pain, their hurt, when I look at the surrounding factors, that we were in the 75th year of the bombing of the Pearl Harbor attack, and yet Colleen Hanabusa still won. It didn't matter how much money we spent. I spent way less than my opponent, and I am grateful that I got 40,000 votes, supposedly. But the cost doesn't add up. It seemed like they were going a little too overboard to demolish me. Rumors that they were shoo-in candidates put out by the media, so we didn't have time to waste on debates or forums. I mean, were they really shoo-in candidates? Sure, if the election is rigged. There is no need to put on a show, so I spent 10 cents per vote, and my opponent spent $4.70 per vote. That's 50 times more than I did. For a shoo-in candidate, why would she have to spend such amount of money? Another thing is that after the election, I noticed that Tulsi didn't make a victory speech, as if she knew something. Perhaps she had a conscience, and it was telling her that she knew something, unlike the other candidates, Hanabusa, Schatz, and Hirono. Our president-elect even said the election is rigged. Okay, so with that, I lost compared to my colleagues and running mates. I lost 3% less to the Air Force colonel and the Air Force pilot. They lost with 22%. I had 17%. And they had no demolishing or negative publicity. So that's not too bad. However, we all lost by significant landslides. Here are some other pretty obvious rumors, or what I've called sounded like brainwashing tactics. Nobody cares about ni hao. Have you guys heard about that? Nobody cares about ni hao. This is a democratic state. That's another brainwashing tactic. And Hawaiians don't vote. Those are not true. I cared about ni hao. And guess what? They voted for Trump, 2-1. This is a democratic state. Again, not true. I signed up as a Republican. And that Hawaiians don't vote? How can one make those assumptions based on the information that is provided? No one can make those kind of assumptions. We don't know if Hawaiians don't vote. We don't know if this is a democratic state, and that everyone votes Democrat, and that everyone that walks around on this island is a Democrat. No, but that's where all the politicians were saying. The ones that were winning. They knew something was going on. With this data analysis, I can't tell you who won or lost. All I can tell you is that there are significant inconsistencies that are generated in their summary report and unexplained, and warrants an investigation, a federal investigation, because this is a federal election. These kinds of inconsistencies do not make sense, and anyone who uses spreadsheet data analysis, this is not the kind of errors that you'd accidentally make. This is a different outlook. As I examined the spreadsheet data, and as I dug, I looked back at all the data that was available on the Hawaii General Election website, going back to all the general elections. My focus, however, is on the 2004, 2008, 2012, and 2016, the presidential primary and general elections. Now, I was told to call the Hawaii General Office if I had any questions, so I did. But before I gave away too much information to them, I didn't get all the answers. There's just too much discrepancies. And the one question that I did ask was about the A and B different precinct and absentees. They gave me an answer, but I wasn't satisfied with their answer. Now, I know in Hawaii, as long as you have an answer to everything, that's another slogan. Whether it makes sense or it doesn't make sense, as long as you have an answer. And the numbers still didn't add up, but they sure had an answer for everything. And that is something else I learned, as long as you have an answer for everything. As the way of life here in Hawaii, even if it's not the right answer, it's still not the answer. So when I started looking at the spreadsheet data, the first thing that I noticed was that the candidate identification numbers were out of order. Now I compared that to the picture that I took with my phone as a candidate. I was able to verify the order of the candidates that they were initially given, which is in alphabetical order. And by the race they were in, the presidential being the first group of numbers, then the U.S. Senate, then the U.S. House District 1, then the Vacancy District 1, and then the U.S. District 2, where I was. All in alphabetical order. My ID number is 26, and that didn't change. Perhaps they knew I was going to keep an eye on that one. And also the day of the election. Now remember, this camera phone, which everyone now has become a tool within the past 5 or 10 years or so. I was able to verify that the candidates were in order by their sections in alphabet order, and there are 161 candidates, with candidate for President Castle being the first, and candidate Emil Seversina being the last candidate, 161. Now with that, there were a total of 99 races. The first 64 races were candidate races. The last 65 to 69 the last 65 races were the charter and constitutional amendment race, all given identification numbers. I had used my camera phone twice. Once, as a candidate, I inspected the ballot and the order of the names, and second, at the polling place on the day of the election, to give me enough verification that this was in alphabetical order, as on the ballot. The problem that I had was that I was unable to inspect other ballots for races on the outer islands. So going on the assumption that this list was in alphabetical order and was constant throughout the islands this way, in alphabetical order. Now, I have a handout. Initially, when I started to put together the database based off the summary results, some of them were not in alphabetical order. Some of these candidates were switched out of order. as you would expect to be based on the ballot's alphabetized order, as you would not expect to be based on the ballot's alphabetized order. Let me give you a handout, and as they would be in order, alphabetized and with their corresponding candidate identification number, as if you were to build a database prior to an election. I have an activity, and that will be in part 2. This ends our part 1 conference to call our people together and to create an awareness that there is something definitely wrong with the results in this election, and it should be, it warrants an evaluation by the federal government. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to go on to part 2, which is the slide presentation. So, yeah, we can start with that. So these are, okay, so these are the candidate part 2. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for listening, Hawaii. This is part 2. I would like you to reference this, this slide here that is presented, federal race, as I was talking about the candidates in order. From race number 1, you see that is the presidential race. It's identified and labeled in alphabetical order from Castle, Clinton, Johnson, Stein, and Trump. Race 2 would be the Senate race, and that's in alphabetical order too. Race 3, race 4, and race 5, and I was constant. My ID number 26 stays constant if you notice that. Observe that. Okay, so let's go to the first slide. Thank you for showing up. What I'm doing is exposing the fraud as a conspiracy theory. And I'm educating you on how an election would be manipulated, the numbers. Okay, this would be about God's enemies will vanish as smoke. The previous one said it will disappear like smoke. Okay, so, you know, my campaign was initially based on religion. But I don't want to talk too much about religion. I mean, if anybody out there agrees with me partial that our forefathers were Christians, or they were fleeing freedom, fleeing persecution from Europe, and they came to America, and that's how America was founded, based on freedom of religion. They wanted to practice their religion, and that their religion, I believe, was mostly believers in God. So we have this slide, okay, so slide number 3, which talks about Hawaii election fraud. Exposing corruption by analyzing the data. A UH professor said he voted in every election. He's a data analyzer, scientist. I asked him, did he ever analyze the data from a presidential election? His response is no. Only if you're a candidate. I suppose you would invest the time in analyzing the data. So here I am analyzing the data as a scientist. They say education is the key, and I always heard that. But now after 9 years of college, well, you know, I hope my education means something and not just a big waste of money. Okay, so this is the 144,000 Angel Network. Here I am exposing Hawaii's election fraud and telling you from a scientific perspective data that has never been analyzed and presented to you before, Hawaii. My campaign was based on our Constitution. I tried to go back and conduct research on who and what our forefathers were. Those who founded our Constitution. This is what I found. Now, if there is any truth to my statements, my platforms, as offensive it may have been, then you will know that what I'm about to expose, that there is some truth in it as well. I'm not here to debate religion. Yes, I believe you're entitled to worship whoever you want to preach or want to worship. As a Christian, we never force our God upon anyone. That's not the Christian way. But I do believe that America was founded by those fleeing religious persecution and that they believed in one God back then. Now, slide number 5. Donald Trump was the first to even say this. He even said that that the election is rigged. I would have still looked at the results and noticed the discrepancies anyway. These are discrepancies that have never been discussed before. The most commons are campaign spending, absentee votes, those kinds of common discrepancies have been thrown at us before. I was curious to see how the numbers were going to turn out. I'm sure everybody were, being that I was in 2 races. And you know what? It doesn't make sense. I grew up in Hawaii, lived here all of my life. I'm very aware of politics and what is going around me. I know people, places, things, events. You don't need to be educated to know these things. But along with that, as an added bonus, I am educated too. So Donald Trump says, yes, the election was rigged. I was told, even though I can prove that it's a theory that the election is rigged, we still would need to have a Republican for a U.S. Supreme Justice to even consider on a re-election. There's no sense in filing. Can you believe that? Filing for a recount or a re-election, even if the data warrants an explanation, as my professor has said. This warrants an explanation, or to even go into those boxes and hand count some numbers or some ballots. I won't say who said this. It seems like this is a very touchy subject. Jobs can be lost, promotions lost, etc., etc. People are in fear to expose this, but I don't have anything to lose. You know, I think it's kind of hilarious and funny. I mean, what do you think, Hawaii? I'm my own boss, so it's my benefit to expose the corruption if there is any anyway. I have nothing to fear. I have nothing to hide. This is a one-time deal. I will be educating you, Hawaii, but I will also be educating the fraud. And the people who are intentionally or intentionally making these mistakes, honest mistakes or not, educating the criminals, if they are even the criminal, if there is even one. The only way is to open up those boxes and count them by hand, or do some random checks of precincts and counts. From what I understand, no one has ever accomplished challenging the results. I'm teaching you, but I'm also educating the ones making these mistakes. They're being educated as well so that they will never make these mistakes again. Okay, so some of the questions that I have is like, why would you even care if the election is rigged? Do you even care, Hawaii or Mr. Trump? And what difference would it make if I told you that the election may have been rigged for the past 12 years? There's inconsistency in data and numbers and reporting for the past at least 12 years. The next question I'd be brought that I would like to ask you is, if there is fraud, what do you do? What do you think should be done about it? And who would be responsible? I mean, why even vote in an election if the numbers and the candidates are pre-selected anyway? It seems like such a big waste of time and money. So as you look, it doesn't make sense. Okay, the U.S. Supreme Justice is a Democrat, most likely. So speaking to one attorney, probably nothing will happen right now. If we filed, it will be thrown away. It will be thrown out the door as soon as possible. Until a Republican U.S. Supreme Justice takes office is what would have had to occur. Okay, so back to that slide. It doesn't make sense, number 11. For example, Gabbard, she spent $80,000. Now you divide that by 170,000 votes, that becomes $4.70 a vote. Take a look at me now, Kaaihue. $4,000. I spent $4,000, I got 40,000 votes, supposedly, okay? And that's 10 cents a vote. Now, if I wanted to get 50% of the 210,000 votes, that would equal 107,000 votes in order for me to win. And at that amount, times 10 cents, I would have only had to spend $10,700. $10,700 to win an election, Hawaii. Based on that, the amount of spending, campaign spending. Okay, today is November 22nd, 2016. The deadline to file for a re-election or to contest this election is November 28th, 2016. Now again, I mentioned about this U.S. Supreme Justice. It probably doesn't even matter. The wrong timing. You know, I know all about timing. Everything is about timing. Okay, so this might be the wrong time to even file a case. I'm letting you guys know about this so that way we can put the pressure for next time if there's an election. I don't like what's going on, so I will expose this, okay? That's why I'm doing this. For Hawaii, for you, for America. These are valid questions. I am unable to determine who the winner or the loser is based on the information that was provided. Okay? I can't verify that based on the information. But what a professor says it warrants logical answers that needs to be proven. I'm going to show you the inconsistencies, and these need an explanation. And to prove it, you would have to do a random count, check by hand, which is almost impossible to get into. I mean, why is it so difficult to go into those boxes, open up the boxes, and take a look at the ballots and count them by hand, randomly? Certain precincts, not hand-picked precincts, we want to do a random check. Okay, the UH professor, a data analyzer, and a scientist expert that studies and uses spreadsheet data voted each time for every election. And he never once analyzed this data. Why? I don't know, because they're not interested in the results, like how I am, because I was a candidate, so I wanted to look at the results. He said that we would not be able to tell intentional versus unintentional. Okay, so I'm not here to do that. I'm just, that's not my job. That's not what I'm here for. It could be an honest mistake. So when we take a look at another UH professor, another data analyzer and a scientist, very high-profiled, smart, I call him a scientist, and he is a scientist. Well, actually, he is a scientist. He says it warrants an explanation. And he was actually surprised that these numbers were inconsistent like that. So let's take a look at the Republican team. The Republican team is, who we are. Now, I like to consider the Air Force as one of the military elites. And that's what we are. The Air Force is known to be the elite of the military. The Air Force. The Marines is the go-getters, and you got the Army, and then you got the Navy, and you got the Air Force. So Charlene Ostrov, she is an Air Force colonel. I myself, I'm the daughter of an officer, Air Force officer, and I'm also the daughter of a disabled Army Vietnam veteran. And then you got John Carroll. He was the Air Force pilot. This was your Republican team. This was your Republican candidates in this election. Now, as you can see, we all lost by a landslide. Yes, we were the Republican team. We failed. We failed big time, Hawaii. The Air Force elite, we teamed up and tried to go in and see what was going on, assess the situation, and basically we lost. We lost by a humiliating landslide. That is very humiliating. 17%, 22%, those are landslides. Landslide losses. So now Hillary Clinton said that this election was about coming together as Americans, okay? As an American, who are you? If you are of mixed ethnicities, if you're Japanese, Korean, Hawaiian, Caucasian, Filipino, who are you? What are you? Are you an American? Because if you're an American, it's time to come together as an American and defend America, our country. And this is for you Hawaiians too. Because if Americans lose, you lose too. I mean, I already say that we've been annexed by another country. Over the past years, I wasn't a proud American because of these atrocities that were occurring in our government. We need to come together because there is a serious problem. I believe here in Hawaii, I think there are a lot of people who agree with me that there is a serious problem. Okay, next slide is number 19. Don't be offended. Okay, let's take a look at this. This is the first in American history, folks. 100% non-Christians have taken office, federal office here in Hawaii. The USA military was slammed by heathens, pagans, and idolaters. Now, I don't want you to be offended if you're a heathen, okay? What is a heathen? A heathen is somebody who doesn't belong to a widely held religion, especially one who is not a Christian, Jew, or Muslim. That's taken off the encyclopedia. Okay, so we lost. 22%, Colleen Hanabusa won. The top row is the losers and the bottom row is the winners. We got Colleen Hanabusa, the Buddhist, and then Tulsi Gabbard, she's the Hindu, and then we got Brian Schatz, he's the Jew, and then we got Mazie Hirono, who's already an incumbent there. She's the Buddhist. We only have 4. We only have 4 congressional offices, and all 4 are heathens. Okay? I'm not saying it in a derogatory way. I'm saying it as it comes off of the encyclopedia. What a heathen is. It's a pagan. It's an idolater. You worship idolaters. You're called an idolater. Okay, so now there's something that's been so funny that's been talked about in the news lately too, is the religious test on new immigrants. They actually want to apply a religion test on new immigrants. Is that unreasonable? I don't think so, because this is about protecting America. So we have another slide, assumption or fact. Okay, here, USA military humiliated, loses by a landslide. Again, I just wanted to reiterate that we lost. We lost 22% to 71%. The Air Force Colonel, Shirlene Ostrov. And I lost, daughter of an officer, daughter of an Air Force officer, 19% to 81%. Haha, is that funny, Hawaii? Is that really funny, America? Is that funny? Is this a hilarious joke played on the Air Force elites? Played on an Air Force colonel, a retiree? Played on a daughter of an Air Force officer and disabled veteran, Army veteran? Okay, so this slide talks about the assumptions or facts. Now, as scientists and engineers, sometimes we have to assume things, and we know the difference between an assumption or a fact. So, for example, reasons for losing. Okay, here's some reasons that people have been throwing at, that I've heard. Nobody knows her. So really, Shirlene Ostrov, nobody knows Shirlene Ostrov by now? I think she's done pretty well and got her name out there. Everybody knows who Shirlene Ostrov is, and that's the reason why she lost. Okay, that's an assumption, because there's no evidence of that. Okay, that's an assumption. Racist bigot hater, they called me a racist bigot hater. Am I really a racist bigot hater? No, I hate the people that are involved in my lawsuit. Yeah, because they've put 5 years hold on my property and building a house. I mean, that is a justified kind of anger, a justified kind of hate. But do I hate everybody? No. Okay? Maybe I made some fun of some people, but I'm trying to notify you of what people think of you guys. Okay? And that's how you get manipulated and played for. Another one that I heard, we didn't raise enough money. Okay, so, I mean, really, we didn't raise enough money. Is that an assumption or a fact? Because I've proven that I got a vote only by 10 cents a vote. Okay, so it costed me 10 cents a vote based on how much money I spent. Okay, these are hypotheses. It is unproven. Okay, these are assumptions. Now, here's another excuse. The election was rigged. Okay, that's what Donald Trump said, okay, and that's what I'm saying too. Is this a possible excuse? But if this is a possible excuse, then why are people afraid to say it? The election is rigged. That's why we lost. People don't want to say that, but you come up with every other kind of assumptions except for this one. These are brainwashing slogans, okay? Assumptions versus facts. Here are some brainwashing slogans. Nobody cares about ni hao. That's a brainwashing slogan. I mean, because I care about ni hao. Hawaiians don't vote. And 3, Hawaii is a democratic state. These are unproven assumptions, but those are thrown at us a lot, very commonly heard. But these are unproven, yet people throw that out. Number 24, brainwashing, days of Hitler. Assumptions versus fact. Fact number 1, nobody cared about ni hao. Well, nobody cared about ni hao, that it mistakenly, accidentally came through. That island actually voted Trump 2-1. Fact number 2, unidentifiable precinct 45-03. Trump won that one too, and I as well won that, but that's unidentifiable. I don't know why they don't have an address for it. And number 3, 247 of 248 precincts counted. Now see, these are facts. 247 of 248 precincts counted based on the summary report. Okay, so number 25, slide number 25. We have become what our forefathers sought to destroy. What does that mean? I mean, that's a saying. People talk about that. It's somehow published somewhere. We have become what our forefathers sought to destroy. They tried to destroy corruption, perhaps, right? So have we become that? I think so. It was said that they didn't want heathens in office, and now we have become that. So they tried to prevent that, and they did away with this religious test because they didn't want to discriminate against anybody, and they left it up to people like us who would take a stand and say, hey, there's a problem, we need to address this. Okay, next slide is the biggest loser. I was labeled the biggest loser, most hated, racist, and bigoted. I was labeled by news journalists, mock teased and ridiculed and spit on by Hawaiian Japanese citizens for speaking out on racism and religion. I was labeled a fake Hawaiian, a wannabe Hawaiian, told to go back to Texas. Despite the fact that I was raised here all my life, I probably lived here just as long as I probably lived here in Hawaii longer than most people. Taking into consideration my age and that I did not move to Las Vegas or move to the mainland, I've lived here all my life. I'm the daughter of an Air Force officer, and I have been disrespected, and this is disrespectful to the U.S. military, veterans, and families. Is this what you guys wanted? Well, this is what you guys got. And the second district, 76% to 18%. Divided, we all fell. Because if us military fall, Hawaii, you fall too. Okay, so the next slide talks about how many votes I got. So 170,000 votes versus 40,000 votes. Okay, and again, Tulsi Gabbard spent approximately $4.70 per vote versus me. I spent 10 cents per vote. If I wanted to have won this election, I would have had to spend $10,000 and I would have gotten 50% of the votes. Now, this is a one-time deal. What I'm about to expose, if this is fraud or just an honest mistake, they will never make this mistake again because they will fix it. And it will never be noticeable or distinguished in their data. Okay, we, the people, are the rightful masters of both Congress and the courts. Not to overthrow the Constitution, but to overthrow the men who would pervert the Constitution. That is what Abraham Lincoln said. Now, why would he even talk about that there would be perverts of the Constitution? Who do you think would be the perverts? I mean, back then they must have had some kind of perverts. And so, I mean, in these days, could we be living in a modern day society of people perverting the Constitution? I believe so. I mean, they almost wanted to take away my right to run in a Congress in a federal election. How? They sued me to get my name off the ballot as a Democrat, and I was also disavowed by the Republican Party. To me, that was double whammy by both the Republican and the Democratic Party, and they tried to get me off the ballot. Now, that would be a perversion of the Constitution because it is my constitutional right to run in an election. So what I'm going to show you is this next slide, which is 30. Okay, we had 64 candidate races. They were labeled 1 through, I believe, 17. There were 161 candidates, 99 races total, including the charter amendments. So 1 through 161 are the candidates, and there were 64 candidates. Okay, let's take a look at the presidential race. When you take a look at the presidential race, as a candidate, I was able to look at the ballot prior to the election. Now, one thing I just observed on today was that prior to the election, there was 4 candidates. Okay, as you can see in that picture, I took a picture of it. There was Clinton, Johnson, Stein, and Trump. Now, on the day of the election, there was 5 candidates. Now, I find that very odd. You don't just throw in another candidate. His name is Castle there. So there was 5 elections. And as you can note here, I want you to note that the order of the names is in alphabetical order. Castle, Clinton, Johnson, Stein, and Trump. It's in alphabetical order, and you can see I voted for Trump. That's my ballot right there. I took a picture of it, and a lot of people took pictures of their ballots this year. Okay, the next slide talks about, again, the names, and it proves that the candidate orders are in alphabetical order. So again, the first block of information is the federal candidates. The second block is the senator. So you got candidate 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 5 being Allison, Carroll, Gilfrey, Kokowski, and Schatz. So note, Kokowski is number 9, and Schatz is 10. But in that series right there, as a senator, it's they're labeled 2 different numbers. 5 through 10, and also 1 through 5, because Allison is being the first in that little section. The U.S. Representative, District 1, is, there's 4 candidates. So if you note, I voted for Shirlene Ostrov, Republican. She's also identified as candidate number 13. Okay, so in alphabetical order, and then you got the U.S. Representative Special District, which there were 10 candidates, all in alphabetical order. So the next slide will show us that the senator is in alphabetical order, District 2. Okay, there's me. That's a picture of that I took. I'm candidate number 26, and that remains constant, perhaps because they knew I would be looking at this, and I'll be looking at 26, and I'll be looking at Tulsi Gabbard, who's 25 on the ballot. On the right-hand side, that is a picture of the ballot that I took with my camera phone as a candidate. I was able to take a picture, and that would prove, again, that those are in alphabetical order and in by sections. You can note that Trask and Lindsay comes before Trask, L before T. So again, those would be in alphabetical order. Okay, and the next slide talks about, again, that's the special race. There's 10 candidates. I voted for myself, of course. I'd vote for myself. But it's in alphabetical order. C, G, H, K, K, O, Ostrov, you got Cross, you got Griffin, you got Hanabusa, Kaaihue, you got Kim, you got Ocasio, Ostrov, Perry, Potzinder, Zender, and Yim. There were 10 candidates there. So as you can see that, the next slide, please. Okay, that's how we put them together. 1 through 26, okay? You got the presidential, the Senate, the senator, district, District 2, G comes before K. Okay, that's, okay, next slide, please. So federal race, we're looking at just the federal race right now, okay? So you have, I comprised this list 1 through 26. There were 5 offices in the federal race. The first one, the first column is race 1, listed in alphabetical order, 1 through 5. And then you got the second race, which is 6 through 10. The third race, which is Griffin to Lim. And then Cross to Yim. And then Gabbard Kaaihue. And then, as you can see, I was always number 26. That didn't change. Let's go to the next slide. Now, 37 will present to us a little more detailed information on, okay, you got the ballot names, 1 through 5. Now, if you look at Clinton, now Castle came onto the ballot at some time. Okay, so the ID, now this is the summary ID and then the sequencing ID. The summary ID, which is presented to us there was 2 files by the Hawaii General Election Office. One is the summary, and then the other one was the text file. So taken from the text file, the ID numbers switch. If you look at ballot number 1, the name is Castle according to the alphabetical order. In the summary report, it now becomes 5. 2 on the ballot now becomes 4. 3 on the ballot becomes 2. 4, Stein now becomes labeled as identity number 1. And 5, Trump is labeled as identity number 3. Okay, now let's take a look at Kukowski. Let's drop down a little bit to the Senate race. 9 is Kukowski on the ballot, and you know he stays 9 on the candidate ID. He stays 9. Let's take a look at Ostrov. Next section is the District 1 race. Ostrov is 13, now becomes 14. Hanabusa is 12, becomes 11. Okay, how does that happen? That kind of discrepancy does not happen. Let's go to the right-hand side, which is the special election candidates. They all get mixed around. 15 was Cross. He stays 15. 16 changes, 17 changes. They all just somehow change. Ostrov is 21. She stays consistent as 21 in the summary report. Okay, so and they stay in sequential order. That's what the 1 through 10 is for. They're listed in sequential order. And 25, if you note 25, it stays 25, and 26 stays 26. So they knew I'm keeping an eye on this, on my candidate ID number, so they were certain to make sure my information stays consistent. Okay, next slide. Now, we look at the precinct details of Nihao. This is what the text file looks like. It may seem very little difficult or challenging to read, but once you are able to understand it, you can very easily identify it. So in ni hao, if you look at the right-hand side of the columns, I don't know if there are numbers there, and it shows that this is ni hao. It shows that ni hao voted for Trump 2-1. Hillary lost, and it's 2-1 kind of numbers. Then the next slide would be the end of part 1. This would be the ending of part 1. This is what a summary report looks like. This is what I was looking and utilizing to analyze the data. This is one report. I compared it with the other report. This is actually the text file report. So the precinct data's report. And there's also a precinct data report. So when you compare these reports along with the ballots, you would think that these ID numbers, and it says on the top there, candidate ID number, would stay the same and should follow in order as an alphabetical order, as well as it would be on the ballot. If you're going to be switching or putting in order the person who won to the least, and that's how all these sections are put into order, from highest amount of votes to the lowest amount of votes. Well, you would keep the sequential order, and you would also keep the candidate ID numbers as well too. And I can also prove that how it's randomly changed. It's sometimes it's consistent, sometimes it's not consistent. You have all these different kind of, it just doesn't add up. It doesn't make sense. And it deserves an explanation. Okay, so this is the end of part 1, and thank you for tuning in and listening to my data analysis of this Hawaii general election and how I'm exposing the fraud in this election. And this is a one-time only, because once I expose their mistakes, they will probably never do it again. Or whoever is behind it, I'm not saying who's behind it. It could be an honest mistake. It could be an honest mistake, and it could be just lousy data reporting. Okay, I'm not here to put the blame on anybody. All I'm here is saying that this is not how you report data. And if this is not how you report data, they will fix it. And like in certain years, in 2012, it was perfect. Okay, if I had looked at that data, I wouldn't have noticed anything unusual. I wouldn't have been able to notice it. But when I looked at 2016, and then I looked also back at 2008, yeah, they were mixed matched and they were just all over the place. But 2012 was perfectly well done, and like I said, I wouldn't have been able to notice or identify anything. Okay, so once this is determined, or once this is evaluated, and these mistakes are brought to one's attention, I can almost guarantee they will do a better job next time in reporting data. So we're going to take a break right now. Thank you.